Wherever you're listening in the world, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Israelcast, the podcast powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. I'm Stephen Shalowitz, and on this episode, our featured guest is journalist and commentator Rolene Marks, who definitely has her finger on the pulse of all things Israel. Born in South Africa, but making Israel her home since 2010, Rolene is a co-founder of the Lay of the Land website and host of the Israel Brief on YouTube and co-founder of the South Africa Israel Policy Forum. Rolene is a regular commentator and correspondent on media outlets worldwide, including Channel News Asia and my adopted hometown of Singapore, and I just had to throw that one in. That's just a flavor of who Rolene is. She wears many hats, and we'll have her bio on the show notes page of this episode on our website and on our YouTube channel as well, so check it all out. But meantime, Rolene Marks joins us now on the line via Zoom from her home in Modi'in, Israel. Rolene, welcome to Israelcast.
Stephen, from the home of the Maccabees, I could not be more delighted to join you.
And we couldn't be more delighted to have you here on this episode. So thanks so much for joining us. Before we begin our conversation, Rolene, I just want to remind our wonderful audience that for over 125 years, Jewish National Fund USA has been the premier philanthropic movement for the land and people of Israel. While best known for planting trees in Israel, JNF USA contributes to Israeli life in so many ways, including community development in the Negev and the Galilee, preservation of heritage sites, supporting people with disabilities, connecting high school and college students to Israel, and helping our brothers and sisters in need following the heinous October 7th terrorist attack. To learn more and to see how you can contribute, do visit jnf.org. Once again, jnf.org. Plus, if you haven't done so already, we'd love it if you subscribe, rated, and reviewed us, 5 stars, of course. Wherever you get your podcast, just search for Israelcast. It's that easy. And we'd love it too if you shared the show within your orbit. All right, let's bring back Rolene Marks to the program. Rolene, I'd like to start with your birth country of South Africa. Its ties with Israel are at an all-time low. So what happened?
Well, the ties between Israel and South Africa have always kind of been very, very complicated. There are a lot of schools of thought about what those ties looked like, before the birth of what I would call modern democracy in South Africa that moved from apartheid into full democracy. And certainly in the last, I would say, since Operation Cast Lead, we've seen a steady downturn in bilateral ties between the two countries. But ties between Israel and South Africa have really hit an all-time low following the 7th of October. South Africa, once viewed as the country came out of apartheid as the great Rainbow Nation, the great example of how you bring a diverse citizenry into democracy without any kind of civil war, which we anticipated at the time. And we have certainly seen South Africa take a foreign policy that is contrary to the values that the anti-apartheid leaders fought so hard and vigilantly for. The South African government has aligned itself with rogue nations, countries like Iran, Qatar, Cuba, and various others, taking a completely different tact to the Western-style democracy that we hoped it would take. Now, following the 7th of October, things have just headed steadily downhill. Before we had even collected the bodies from the communities and the areas of the South, as the South African Department of International Relations and Cooperation, or DIRCO as they're called, they put out a statement that basically blamed Israel for the 7th of October, basically saying, well, your policy of this and that has led to this. So basically, you deserve this. A few days later, the foreign minister hopped a flight to Iran, made a point of being photographed meeting with the late Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and the late Iranian president Ibrahim Raisi, it's all, I wonder how she feels now. A lot of the people she seemed to have meetings with are no longer with us. With the Ayatollah Al Khamenei, making it very, very blatant in the eyes of the world where South Africa's allegiances stand. And then, not even 3 months into the defensive war against Hamas, South Africa filed that ludicrous case accusing Israel of genocide at the ICJ with incredible speed, Stephen. Barely 3 months into a war, they had managed to determine that Israel was committing genocide and filed that with incredible speed. And also highly, highly coincidental was the fact that the ruling ANC party's huge debt seemed to be cleared very, very quickly. Very mysteriously. I don't know how that happened, but
in inverted commas, as you would say, Roelien, it was
yeah,
mysteriously after a
it
visit
was
to Iran.
mysteriously cleared.
After a
Everybody
visit to
thought
Iran.
after that visit to Iran, it was a
Let's connect it. Let's have our audience connect the dots there.
absolutely. One and one, might equal 34 in this case. And
or $34 billion, maybe, whatever the amount was.
Whatever the amount was, it certainly was very, very suspicious. And I do want to be clear, this is not the case for every political party in South Africa, because there are parties that are very vocal in their support of Israel. The Patriotic Alliance, the African Christian Democratic Party, and various others are very, very vocal in saying our foreign policy is going to get us into a lot of trouble. It's going to cost us our ties with countries like the United States. It's going to cost us very important treaties that bring employment and investment into the country. And, now where we sit in this incredible moment where the Iranian regime is possibly at its weakest, it's going to be very interesting to see how South Africa maneuvers that one.
If I can interrupt, but can I just interrupt you for a moment, though? Because we were joking about how the debt from the ANC just got wiped away after a visit to Iran, and of course, joking about let's connect the dots. However, at its core, was that really what this relationship was about between South Africa and Iran, or was there something else that played into that?
That's a fascinating question, because first of all, with regards to that mysterious jolt in budget that cleared debt, the South African government were very, very careful in how they framed the financing of that ICJ case. They created or cleared funds from the National Treasury to fund that. But it all seems very, very suspicious. And, we can't forget that the ANC, through their history, have been masters at how to go undercover, how to maneuver funding, etc., because they were an organization that was banned and largely in exile. So it's very, very interesting to come back to that. But there's no question that South Africa, if Hamas is acting as the military proxy of Iran, South Africa is acting as its legal proxy. Using whatever legal apparatus it has, using its reputation as the country that successfully fought and defeated apartheid to bring this case against Israel. Those what we call struggle credentials give it cachet in the world. At least the government seems to think that. And if I can just go back in time a little bit, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it's no coincidence that if we go back to 2001 to a little event in Durban, South Africa called the UN Conference Against Racism, where this whole movement of boycott, divestment, and sanctions burst into the global consciousness, where we started to hear language like apartheid Israel, colonizers, all the slurs, occupation, all the slurs that are routinely leveled at Israel. It's no coincidence that this whole movement came from South Africa, because the visuals of all of that look very, very powerful, gives it impetus. And before that, we know that NGOs had met in, here's some more dots to connect, Iran. So everything sort of comes back to Tehran. Everything comes back to this very, very well organized campaign against the Jewish state, this campaign of delegitimization and now destruction. And South Africa has a very, very, very powerful role that it plays as Iran's legal proxy. And South Africans like me in Israel have always warned, ignore South Africa at our peril, because something's coming down the pike, and here we have it.
And so talk about that ICJ case that South Africa brought up.
Well, South Africa sees itself as the moral conscience of the world. They see it as having a duty as the country that saw the defeat of apartheid. It's their role. This is certainly how they framed it. It's their role to lead the charge against genocide. Conveniently, they have forgotten the genocides on the African continent, including in Nigeria of tens of thousands of Christian people, in Mozambique as ISIS moves through the country murdering people in their wake. They've forgotten about that. They've turned a convenient blind eye to other genocides around the world. And they've also forgot to hand over al-Bashir from the Sudan. When there was an ICC warrant out for his arrest, he was given a place in South Africa. So South Africa seems to have selective global consciousness, and that selective consciousness seems to only have one target. But this is where they see themselves as a leader, and also strategically, South Africa is part of the BRICS group of nations. So it's Brazil, Russia,
China, and India,
Saudi Arabia, India. So they see themselves as very influential there, very influential in the African Union, and that they are setting the standard for what we do with human rights. Unfortunately, they seem to have neglected a lot of human rights violations in other parts of the world.
Yeah, we'd be remiss if we also didn't bring up the charges that they claim that Israel is an apartheid state, because we've discussed before here on the program how that is obviously utterly ridiculous, but it's also an affront to those people in South Africa that fought against apartheid.
Absolutely. I think, and again, this is my theory, the new guard waited for the old guard, the Nelson Mandelas, who held Israel in great esteem. The BDS are very quick to say, Nelson Mandela said we can't be free until all the Palestinians are free. But they forget the second half of that quote, where he said, I believe in Israel's right to live within safe and secure borders, and where he recognized Zionism as the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. That half of the quote is very conveniently forgotten. But it's a ludicrous accusation. And the ANC have a policy where they don't like or allow ministers in government to visit Israel. And it's easy to see why, because once you come here, you see that that accusation is absolutely ludicrous. They know that the majority of the world don't have a cooking clue what apartheid was. And I grew up during the apartheid years. I bore witness to it. Jews were very much a part of the anti-apartheid movement. And I live in Israel, and I can see that the accusation that they accuse us of and the reality on the ground is completely different. And when South African victims of apartheid come to Israel, they are the first to defend the state of Israel and say, it is an insult to us, to all we endured, to all that we fought for. And it's nothing less than a slur, so that Israel is treated the same way as South Africa was treated during that time, which is painted as a pariah, excluded from the family of nations, but with one very, very distinct difference. During the apartheid years, people used to say, the apartheid regime of South Africa must fall. South Africa must change its policies. Today, we see something more nefarious. We see calls for the end of Israel to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people. Now, I'm not a maths person. In fact, I'm pretty dismal at maths. But in my eyes, if you say that out of all the nations in the world, only the Jewish people have no right to peoplehood, national self-determination in our ancient homeland, and to call that Zionism, if you say that we're the only ones in the world who are not allowed that, isn't that racist? Isn't that a form of apartheid, where you separate and you designate the Jewish people by a different set of laws that makes them less than?
Rolene, what should our audience know about Mandla Mandela, Nelson Mandela's grandson?
What people should know about Nelson Mandela's grandson, Mandla Mandela, is that he is the black sheep of his family.
And the reason I ask is because everybody likes to trot him out when they want to make an anti-Israel case. They say, see, look at Nelson Mandela's grandson.
Well, first of all, I had the privilege of interviewing Nelson Mandela's two granddaughters who came to Israel just a couple of months ago. In fact, they were here for the hostage releases. They were here for that. They went into Gaza. They handed out food with the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They met with hostage families. They went to places like Nir Oz. They spoke to Palestinians. They spoke to Israelis. And they have a completely different take on the situation than Mandla has. Nelson Mandela was a great believer in the right of the Jewish people to have national self-determination. He visited here. It was members of the Jewish community that gave Mandela and his cohorts the opportunity to work and do their legal articles when they had graduated universities, when nobody else would because of the laws of the land. And then you have Mandla. So what people need to know about Mandla is Mandla has no relevance. Mandla is a thug. He actually faced legal challenges for pulling out a gun and threatening his wife at the time. Mandla also heads up the Al-Quds Foundation, which is seen as, just an inch short of extremist, and that he is a troublemaker. He's somebody who is trading on the Mandela name to try and gain relevancy. And he is completely irrelevant. I mean, now he wants to sell a new flotilla to Israel to bring us to our knees. I mean, I don't think he got the memo that there's a ceasefire in place. and that if you're going to sail into our waters, you're going to meet an armada of our navy, and it's not going to be very pleasant for you. Your ship's going to be confiscated, and you're going to get a stale sandwich.
And those sandwiches aren't very good, despite the fact that Israeli food is really delicious. Just saying. How did he get to that point? I know he converted to Islam, if I'm not mistaken, but how did he get to that point, Rolene?
Well, there are a lot of very radical elements in South Africa. And, when you've got names as prominent as Mandela, you're an easy mark for an organization or for a group to push whatever ideology they want with the backing of the Mandela name. We also have, another very worrying development. We have the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which has always been a bastion of reconciliation of the values of Nelson Mandela. And it is now headed by that same foreign minister, Naledi Pandor, who went to Iran and who pushes a very, very anti-Israel agenda. So I think it's very, very clever co-opting by the anti-Israel establishment in South Africa, that if you want cachet, that if you want relevance, make sure that in some way or the other, you have the Mandela name. So they've got Mandela and they've got the foundation. But what they don't have is the entire family, and what they aren't doing is being a reflection of the values of Nelson Mandela.
Just a couple other South Africa bases before we move on. I understand also the South Africa Medical Association has cut ties with the Israel Medical Association. And what should we know about that? And are we likely to see that happen with other associations? Because in my mind, that really works to the detriment of the healthcare of South Africans.
It absolutely does. The vast majority of South Africans don't have access to adequate healthcare, and this would deprive them of groundbreaking and life-saving Israeli medical technology. Now, when the South African Medical Association broke ties from its Israeli equivalent, there were a contingent of Jewish doctors who broke their ties with the medical board, saying, it's not a reflection of our values. And also, you are now depriving South Africans, ordinary South Africans, of this groundbreaking medical technology. Not only that, it's a betrayal of the Hippocratic Oath, of the values of medicine, which is not to be political and not to be partisan. And I think we are seeing a very, very worrying trend. And it's a horrible sense of déjà vu that we've seen before in our history, where certain industries lead that kind of nefarious area of anti-Semitism. During the time of the Nazis, the medical fraternity were one of the first to turn against the Jewish people. And sadly, we are seeing a lot of that, a lot of those elements play out today, not just in South Africa, but in other places around the world. And the UK Medical Board Authority said they would also possibly consider breaking away from the Israeli Medical Authority. And all it does is betrays the tenets of medicine: first do no harm and save lives.
At its core, and this is something that I really don't quite understand, it seems that there are many South Africans that are Christian, religious, Zionist, they're very pro-Israel, yet you have a government that is anti all that. So how do you square that?
I think you've hit on something very, very important, and that's to know that South Africa is a majority Christian country. It's a country that either does very vocally support Israel And we've certainly seen since the 7th of October, lots of delegations coming here, academic, parliamentary, religious, journalists, scholars, tourists, a whole variety of different delegations have come here to see for themselves, to see the reality on the ground, to understand the complex situation here, but also to see a side that they're not getting in their media. And I would say that the vast majority of South Africans either don't care about what is happening here. They want to be able to switch the lights on and have electricity, and they want to have access to water. There are some parts of the country, including the built up urban areas, that can go for days without access to water because of the lack of infrastructure. And we just had this ridiculous situation a couple of weeks ago when the Israeli Chargé d'Affaires was expelled from the country for offering one of the most poverty-stricken and drought-stricken parts of the country access to Israeli water technology and access to a hospital like Sheba that would come in and help repair their broken down hospital systems. This is this demented foreign policy at play, and South Africans see that, and they don't want that. They want their basic needs met. They don't want to import a foreign conflict into their country, because that is effectively what is happening. They don't want a very myopic foreign policy that aligns with rogue nations and possibly puts very, very important trade agreements that bring employment and investment at great risk. But you do have very, very extreme elements within South African society, and they have tremendous influence over government policy. And unfortunately, this is where we're sitting at the moment.
Yeah, what I don't understand is why they're not chucked out. I mean, let's divorce ourselves from Israel and Gaza and the Middle East, but they're not even delivering the basics for their own people, and yet they're not chucked out.
Well, I think you've got, for many people in South Africa, you've got a history of voting for a specific party, and that's what they know, and that's what they go with. But what we did see in the last national elections was that the ANC, the ruling ANC that has always enjoyed huge margins of majority, saw that significantly reduced. And now, of course, in this government, which is a government of national unity, you've got smaller parties, some of them very, very extreme, who do support the ANC's policies. And it's not a reflection of the vast majority of South Africans. There seems to be some kind of break between what the people of South Africa want and what their foreign policy is. And when this government was put together, the parties that are the most hostile towards Israel, they wanted specifically the foreign affairs portfolios. This is what they wanted. They didn't care about services and other things. They wanted specifically this one. And this is where you see that South Africa's foreign policy is completely captured by regimes like Iran. And we see it playing out against Israel.
Yeah, and this will be very interesting to see. We're recording this episode. We should share with our wonderful audience on Monday, the 23rd of February, where we just got hit with a massive snowstorm here in New York. So I think I'd rather be in Modi'in with you right now, where it's probably quite lovely outside. But we're recording on February 23rd. We're going to release it on March 4th. So anything can happen vis-a-vis Iran from now until then. So just saying, I think it'll be very interesting to see as Iran plays out how that will impact South African foreign policy and the ripple effects in South Africa.
Oh, that's for sure. I think It will be very, very fascinating to see if they pivot at all, or if they look to other kind of rogue states to prop them up. Russia, maybe China, if they form stronger alliances there. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens. Incidentally, we are still waiting for a condemnation of the Iranian regime for murdering tens of thousands of its citizens for protesting against them. I don't see any condemnations forthcoming
From South
from
Africa.
South
Yeah.
Africa.
Right. All right. Well, listen, let's pivot now. And you being a media person, I want to ask you about the rise in right-wing media globally, particularly here in the United States. We just had Tucker Carlson, for example, in Israel. And no sort of question in particular, but if you can just sort of weigh in on the lay of the land, to use your website's name, the lay of the land there, and what we should be concerned about.
Look, it's very, very concerning, the rise of the right-wing podcasters, and also the move of certain podcasters who were either very pro-Israel or very neutral, also really siding with these right-wing podcasters who sound like they've actually studied at the foot of Joseph Goebbels with some of the horrific invective that comes out of their mouth. And everybody will know who I'm talking about, the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens. And you know what? We can make as many jokes about Candace and her inability to pronounce, and make as many jokes about Tucker Carlson and the fact that he's gone a little bit round the bend loopy. But the reality is that they have massive followers. They seem to, and I don't just see this with right-wing podcasters, I see it with the big podcasters, people like Piers Morgan and others, who've cottoned on to the fact that the more hateful, the more aggressive the content is, the more it's going to drive the algorithm, the more it's going to drive your audience. We've descended from really, really good alternatives to the mainstream media, which with their coverage of Israel have largely failed. We've gone from reputable alternatives to, and may he rest in peace because he was a great guy, the Jerry Springer of media, because they know that this is what seems to drive content. And it's a very, very worrying sign of society if that is what turns you on, this very, very hateful, aggressive, conspiracy theorist. And I'm sure you get it as well. I certainly get these horrific messages from people who you can tell exactly which podcasts they are listening to from some of the phrases that they use, but it's extremely worrying. I don't understand why we haven't seen the FBI or anybody step in and do something about Candace Owens. I know President Trump called Tucker Carlson into the White House and is believed to have given him a bit of a dressing down and has said, stop this. But millions of young and millions of impressionable people who hang on their every word are buying what they are selling. And it's very, very dangerous. And I don't believe that it is just against Jews. I believe that it is designed this way to cause clashes within the Christian community in places like the United States, where I think Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are not just against Jews, but they're also against Zionist Christians. And it also causes divisions within the conservative side of the political movement in the United States. From where we're sitting in Israel, we look at it and we're like, this is a psyop that we would see played by Qatar and Iran. No two questions about it. But I don't think the average listener understands that or sees that or understands that they are being played. And we are heading into very, very dangerous waters with this.
Do you think the origins of their comments and their programming comes from Iran and Qatar support, or does it come from a religious fervor, or all of the above?
I think it's all of the above. I think that they're being paid to wrap their speak with religious tones. What we've learned since the 7th of October is that Iran, Hamas, Qatar have studied the West very, very carefully, and understand how to use Western values against us. The things that we hold sacred against us. We've seen it in the brainwashing of kids on university campuses and the complete buyout of faculty members on universities. And now they've moved that into the non-traditional media or the new media. And you can see that. You can see somebody like Candace Owens wraps her rhetoric in religion, using certain catchphrases that were used by the Nazis, and no one's putting a stop to that. Some of the accusations that Tucker Carlson made in his interview with Ambassador Huckabee are beyond the pale, and I really hope he gets sued for that. But he knows well the triggers that upset people, and he's playing on that, and he's using religion to wrap that up, and he's using people's maybe latent anti-Semitism to build it up. And what we are seeing is a very, very dangerous phenomenon that we need to start to get ahead of. And again, when we talk about connecting the dots, it's very strange that Tucker Carlson goes to Qatar, and all of a sudden he comes back, with fresh material. It's, all too coincidental. And it's also very coincidental. He comes here, and I believe he had this whole lunatic spiel about being detained and whatever already wrapped up and ready to go before he had even landed here, and turns a regular security issue into an absolute massive media event, because it's his way to demonize Israel. So I think we cannot dismiss it. And we need to figure out a way to get the younger generation who are globbing onto the Candaces and the Tuckers of the world. We need to get them educated post-haste and warn them about the dangers post-haste.
And dare I say, it's not only right-wing or left-leaning podcasters, but I also noticed on Fox News, there's a drip, drip, drip of anti-Jewish sentiment, or at least erasure of Jewishness. I remember on Holocaust Remembrance Day, I was watching Bret Baier's program, and he showed it was clearly Auschwitz, and it was clearly a Holocaust survivor wearing his original uniform, laying a wreath. And his commentary was that we're marking 6 million people that were killed, that were murdered. And I'm like, you mean you didn't have a fraction of a second just to say 6 million Jews that were murdered? Yeah. And, Bret Baier is a smart guy. And I don't know if he was just reading a teleprompter, if someone wrote that, but that's Fox News. And, when I look at the rhetoric of someone like a Jesse Waters, for example, I think it's actually scary given the audience that he has and the following that he has as well, and some of the things that he has said, which I think, and we don't have enough time to go into it right now, but which I think really lean anti-Semitic. And Greg Gutfeld, who I also watch, some of the things that he said make me very, very uncomfortable. I think it's one thing to have a sense of humor, which we can talk about in a moment, or to look at things in a certain way, okay, fine. But I think the moment that we're living in right now, I think require an element of understanding and an element of restraint. It's not about censorship, but it's just about what's in good taste and what is actually factual. So just thought I would share that. And I think weighing in on something like that and really shifting gears, but related to that, Rolene, is Brad Stevens, who recently spoke at the 92nd Street Y here in New York City, and he talked about Jewish resilience. He talked about one of the things and I want everybody to hear that speech that he gave. It's available on YouTube, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. I've listened to it several times, and I've taken copious notes each time. But one of the things that he said is that we need to lean into our Jewishness, irrespective of what other people are saying or what is going on around us, because the proper defense isn't to prove haters wrong. And I'm wondering if you can weigh in on his general comments as well as that we need to lean into our Jewishness.
Well, I'm a firm believer in, first of all, I do believe we have to fight back. I believe we don't just owe it to ourselves and future generations, but we owe it to our ancestors who didn't have voices and didn't have platforms to fight back. And I don't mean like getting to the mud with the pig because you both get dirty and the pig enjoys it. I don't mean, slur for slur match, because that solves nothing. But I do think we've got to show up to call out things that are factually inaccurate. We've got to demand that and it wasn't just Fox News. I saw that phenomenon across the board. We do have to show up to say, excuse me, but the Holocaust was the genocide of the Jewish people, the worst atrocity in modern history. Jews were specifically targeted, and we are going to call you out. And we're going to call you out en masse until you fix you right or wrong. But I'm also a believer in standing up and being Jewish. And, the greatest analogy I can draw is everybody, including myself, are absolutely blown away by Jack Hughes and that golden goal yesterday. And something happened on Twitter that I loved, and that was the hockey media said, he's the only player with a bar mitzvah and a golden goal. This was a hockey site. This wasn't a Jewish site. And I thought, that I love. That I love. You're seeing his pride, because he's spoken about how he celebrated Hanukkah and how important tradition is to him. You're seeing his pride and you're taking it on board. And it's so important for a variety of reasons. First of all, especially in the States where Jews are accused of not putting America first, they're putting Israel first.
And he said he loves America. He said he was proud of America and to represent the United States.
There you go. So there's that element. There's the element that little Jewish boys can look at that and say, I too can score golden goals at the Olympics. We're no longer, for want of a better word, the nebbishes who don't do sports. Those days are over. We've got NBA All-Stars now. We've got gold. We're cleaning up in gold medals in judo and all kinds of different sports. Sports I didn't even know that we did, but we're winning gold medals there. And it's also putting something out there. It's saying, I'm proud of who I am. I own who I am. I'm vocal about who I am. And when we're vocal and strong about who we are, we not only empower other Jews to do the same, but bullies don't like that. And bullies back down. And it's something that we have to do. I often say to people, this time we fight back. We open our mouths, we write those letters, we show up, we call you out when you've done something wrong. And we also take immense pride in who we are. You know, Piers Morgan today had tweeted out, like, why is it necessary to mention he's a Jewish American? He's an American. And everybody, including myself, was saying, you know what, Piers, first of all, for the last 2 or something years, we've been kicked from every side by anti-Semites. In fact, some of us have been murdered because of anti-Semitism. So when a proud young Jew achieves something massive, we are so proud of him. As a collective family, we're going to talk about it. And I actually giggled just before I logged on with you, because he's like, I don't know why religion has to be such an important part. And there's Piers tweeting out something from cricket a couple of months ago saying, this is the first Muslim player. So we've called out, in a strange way, his double standard, that some religions are okay for you to talk about, but others aren't. No, we're going to call you out for that, and we're going to celebrate it. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Well, I really wish that when we call out the anti-Semites, when we call out the Jew hater, when we call out the anti-Israel folks, that people would do it with a little more cleverness and humor, and that it's not just sort of like a visceral reaction, etc. Here, just as a total aside, and some of my friends know this already, here on West 68th Street between Broadway and Columbus, there's been some really horrible anti-Israel graffiti on some scaffolding. It's appeared 3 times, and each one of the times I go there, I first went with spray paint, and then I went with markers and marked it up. And on the 3rd time that I went, someone was passing by, and she's a lovely woman, lives in the neighborhood, and she helped me to scratch it all out. And rather than leaving the graffiti fascism equals Zionism, we blurred out the fascism part, and I wrote we heart Zionism. Okay.
I love
I see heart Zionism. Okay. And we left it there. And you know what? They came back and they re-graffitied the whole thing, but somehow that was left there. And so I think that we have to be clever how we respond to this. And I think all the onslaught, and I think that we have to be a little bit humorous with it. And I love some of the comedians like the Elon Golds of the world, for example, and there's plenty of other comedians, Jerry Seinfeld and so on, that will make light of it and that will put these anti-Semites, Jew haters, that will put the anti-Israel folks in their place. And they will do so with humor, and they will do so with wit, and they will do so being clever. And so I call everybody in earshot to do that, to combat it with being clever rather than just shouting at somebody. Because I like that analogy that you just shared, that if you play in the mud like pigs, what did you just say, Rolene?
Yeah, don't get in the mud. Don't get in the mud with pigs. You both get dirty, and the pig enjoys it.
Exactly. Unless it's like Dead Sea mud, in which case you're going to come out glowing afterwards and your skin is going to look great, right?
Those Zionists made you glow.
Yeah, that's right. Love that. Well, just 1 or 2 more points, then I know you got to wrap. So President Trump's Board of Peace, what saith Rolene about it?
You know what? When I heard this Board of Peace, my immediate thought was, he's creating an alternative to the United Nations.
Yeah, and can I just interrupt you there for a second? Because in Bret Stephens' speech, he said that Philip Glass said that if there's no room at the table, build your own table. And I kind of feel like that's what President Trump did in a way with this Board of Peace, because the United Nations is so useless. And so Israel really can't have a place at that table. So let's build something else, notwithstanding the fact that Turkey is at the table and notwithstanding some of these other nefarious countries are there. But nevertheless, I kind of thought about that. But sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Rolene.
Well, now that you talk about build your own table, one of the important points, yes, we have nefarious countries like Turkey and Qatar there, but Israel is a founding member of the Board of Peace.
Yeah.
we have a seat at that table. And the first matter of importance is dealing with our security. And we don't have that at the United Nations. At the United Nations, we now know that they have a budget of $100 million specifically to aim at Israel. And I don't think with this Board of Peace, we're going to see all these different agencies and agencies within agencies and blocks within blocks. I don't think that that's going to be allowed to form. I find it very interesting that some countries are very reticent to join because the mandate, they say, is very close to the United Nations. But the United Nations has proved itself feckless. They aren't doing anything. And so let this be a warning that if you're not going to do things properly, we're going to establish something that looks like an alternative. We're going to take on one conflict at a time, which you have failed to do. You failed your mandate because you spent all your time kibitzing about one tiny little country, passing resolution after resolution. And my only question is, why did it take so long for somebody to come up with an alternative? And let's see how this goes. You know, I know that they are raising a lot of money for the reconstruction of Gaza. It would be very nice to see a lot of money allocated for the rebuilding of our kibbutzim and areas that were decimated by Hamas.
Let me
On the
interrupt and
7th of
say that
October.
JNF is doing a stellar job with helping out
Phenomenal.
with the whole, what we call Israel envelope, and all the kibbutzim there and all the other villages and everybody else there, you know.
Phenomenal job. Absolutely. And preserving memory and history in places like Nova and some of the other places. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that money is managed, because we know that the last time billions of dollars went into Gaza, it was funneled straight through to Hamas. And the result is the underground metro of tunnels and other nefarious activity. So let's see how this plays out in Gaza. But I think it's interesting, and we are a founding member. So it would be curious to see what, if any, privileged founding members of the Board of Peace have.
Interesting. Listen, as we wind down our conversation, I want to ask you the same question that I asked Douglas Murray when I had him on the One Way Ticket Show podcast. And I ask you this because we're in award season now. We just had the BAFTAs last night. The Oscars are going to come up as we're recording this. We already had the Golden Globes. Are you able to separate an artist from their politics and from their art? Because I really can't. I'm having great difficulty there, Rolene.
Well, I have to be honest, I can't watch those award shows. I like to see what dresses everybody wears, and that's about it. I also have a hard time. You know, I find myself switching on movies or TVs, and I'll go, oh, it's got this one in, and this, no. I wanted to watch Downton Abbey, the movie, but it's got Hugh Bonneville and Heath, and I can't unsee his comments about Israel. The same as Olivia Colman, all of them. I can't unsee their comments, and I find them very, very, very divisive now with their audiences, and not just Jewish audiences. I don't think the majority of people want to be lectured every time they go to a movie or whatever. I saw somebody tweet out today from Ireland, can we go to a movie without a big Palestinian flag hanging on the building? You know, can we just have a moment where there's no politics? And I go back to Jack Hughes, because he really represents something quite phenomenal. He's a young guy, proud to be American, proud of his country. We don't know what his politics are, and it's fantastic. I just found, and I actually myself wrote an open letter, which I'm thinking now of sending directly to the entertainment media, that enough is enough. You're not the people we come to for geopolitical advice and knowledge. We might come to you for what is trending in nails for winter. That's how much influence you have on us.
I'm
What
getting the
advice?
sense that Rolene is sort of like the fashion police of Israel.
I do love a nice look. I do love a nice look. I do confess to that. And quite frankly, it's the only reason to watch these award shows is for the red carpet and then switch off. But nobody wants to be lectured to.
The only thing is, though,
Um,
Rolene, I mean, at the end, while I agree with you, the only thing is, it's a free country, it's a free society. People can say what they want. I mean, we can't put a lid on what someone is going to talk about, and so that's the slippery slope. I just wish that they would just say to themselves, and Douglas brought this up in our interview, that why don't they just say, you know what, I'm not a geopolitical expert. It's politics. I'm an actor. Like, what do you want from me? And just not comment. I just wish, and to your point about Jack Hughes, I hope he doesn't come out and say that he's pro-Israel, he's pro-Hamas, he's pro who knows what. I just hope he just leaves it that he's pro-American and he loves the United States and he was happy to represent his country.
and I've certainly seen so many people say that. It's like, it's so nice not to have somebody lecture us about their politics. It's also an assumption made by all these stars that we want to hear what their politics are. And we don't, it's very narcissistic. It's very see me, hear me, listen to my opinions. They're not knowledgeable enough. They're not geopolitical experts. When we need to know geopolitics, we're not going to the Hadid sisters for their take on, what our security philosophies should be. Maybe shoes, but no.
The sad commentary, though, is that human beings look at these people in the public eye and think they have the answers for everything. And so they expect them to have an answer to US politics, to what color nail polish they should wear, or nail varnish, as you would say, Rolene, they should wear in the winter, or what's going on in the Middle East.
Everything's become political. Everything's
Yeah.
become so uh, polarized. And while everybody has the right to free speech, there are consequences
Yeah.
to free speech. And the consequences of these stars with their kafiyot and their horrible linchpins and their constant letters and petitions, the consequence to that is they're not only dividing their audiences, but they're also creating a environment. They're contributing to an environment of hate where we are getting killed.
I want to really close now with something, though, because you hit on it. It's this division. And as I mentioned before we started rolling, I have a China background. And the Chinese were always about sort of dividing, Chinese Communist Party, dividing, conquering, making everything political, interjecting politics into the arts. During Maoist times, they used to have what we would say in Mandarin, call in Mandarin, 学习小组, which means small study groups that even at work, they would study Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought. And even though China has moved away from that, I still think the ethos is still very much there. Politics plays a key role in China. And I think the Chinese, like the Iranians, are very much behind what is happening in the United States today to try and divide this country and to try and make us interject politics into everything that we do. So by these artists talking about politics, whether it's American politics or Middle East politics, which they know absolutely nothing about, it's clear, they're just playing into the hands of the Chinese and what the Chinese want to do. They want to divide and then conquer us. And that's my point of view on this. So I just think that people need to be cognizant of interjecting politics into everything and mindful of those that do so, because it's very, very dangerous. It's a very slippery slope that we're on right now. And I think we all just have to really, really call it out. Last word, Rolene.
It's very dangerous. And I think one of the reasons why we see this aggression by so many in the arts towards Israel is that we as Israelis don't really fit into any of these boxes. We are very patriotic and proud of our country. We don't have this shame of the past. You know, there were those two polls. There was a Pew poll in the States and a YouGov in the UK with young people that if your country went to war, would you defend it? And the majority in both countries said absolutely not. Whereas here in Israel, on the 7th of October, we had kids coming in from all over the world, coming home to defend their country. When we've had ballistic missiles flying towards us from Iran, we've had 250 people not trying to get out, but trying to get back in. You know, we defy all the boxes. We are very difficult to understand and pin down. And I think, in a way, it seems to have built some kind of contempt. You know, we're a very politically a new savvy country. We know what's going on. And we've certainly got that culture of debate and disagreement, sometimes to our detriment, but we seem to not fit neatly into anyone's box. And I think that scares many in the arts who seem to have a certain philosophy, an idea of how people should be. And instead of getting to know us, they come at us with this antagonism. And I think that's kind of where we have an impasse. And I will still listen to Eric Clapton. And a small part of me thinks every time I listen to one of these artists, because I do love classic rock, who have said something.
You mean Roger Waters?
Roger Waters, I make an exception not to listen to, but I do love Pink Floyd, although the majority love us. But artists like what's his name, Eric Clapton, some of the other artists, I do say to myself, just think, every time a Zionist listens to one of these anti-Zionists albums, they get a like small buzzing in their ear. Or they get a sharp pain in the elbow, and that's enough for me.
Rolene Marks, this has been absolutely fascinating. We want to have you back on Israelcast because there's so much else more to talk about. But in the meantime, we just want to thank you so much for your insights, for your comments. We want to thank you for joining us here on this episode of Israelcast.
It has been an absolute pleasure, and I would be delighted to come back anytime.
All right. And we are going to have info about Rolene on the show notes page of this very episode on our website, on our YouTube channel. So do check it out. Just search for Israelcast. And of course, we do release new episodes of the show every other Wednesday. And just so you never miss an episode, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. Simply search for Israelcast. And don't forget to rate and review us, because that really helps with our rankings, which in turn make it easier for more folks around the world to find us and to hear from really extraordinary people like Rolene Marks. Or you can always enjoy the show by visiting us at our website. It's jnf.org/Israelcast. And indeed, it takes a whole moshav to put Israelcast together. For that, we thank Vivian Grossman and Stefan Oberman, as well as our trusty editor all these years, Jay Rothman. Thanks, Jay. And the music that you hear at the top until the program is titled My Eden. It's by the very talented Rafi Malkiel from his album Water on the Tzaddik label. Israelcast is powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. For more info about JNF USA, visit jnf.org. And if you'd like to write to us with story ideas or just to say howdy, Rolene, would you love to hear from our audience?
I would love to hear from your audience. So hit me up with a comment anytime.
All right. And I'd love to hear from you as well, dear audience. So do email us at israelcast@jnf.org. Once again, for Rolene and yours truly, do email us at israelcast@jnf.org. Meantime, I'm Stephen Shalowitz. Thanking you for tuning in and looking forward to having you join us on future episodes of Israelcast.